What's up, y'all? Eric here, Driveline, world's okayest steering wheel holder. It's middle of the night. What time is it even? 2:15 in the morning. And I'm forced to be stuck at a way station. Kind of like, I mean, it's parking, but it's kind of on the on-ramp side. And just is what it is. So I figured I've been wanting to make this video for some time, and it's been long overdue. So I want to talk a little bit about running a private fleet with Primeinc, and I want to get into an explanation of how it works, what it is, and also what the experience has been, and if I think that it's a good idea to try building one right now, and some other some other odds and ends related to it. So it may get a little lengthy. I don't have notes, so just bear with me as I try to work through everything. I was on the phone earlier today with another private fleet owner, and we're kind of so I've talked to multiple private fleet owners and a guy who had a fleet who left Prime, and this was some time ago, but just all kinds of input, and it's always interesting comparing notes and talking with other private fleet owners to kind of just get a sense of where everybody's at and how everybody's kind of managing through the current freight market. It's a big challenge, and so I want to kind of go through. First of all, let me talk about, man, these trucks going by are blowing me. I'm not on the side by the trucks. I'm actually a long ways from the interstate right now, but they're still blasting me when they go by. So I want to address this comment that I thought was pretty important, just kind of help you guys understand a little bit about it. And then I'll address the message that I got this morning of, hey, thinking about adding a second truck. What are your thoughts? So let me go to this comment first. Well, let me first say to anyone who doesn't know, I do have a private fleet, a mini fleet, some people call it, with Primeinc, and have been running multiple trucks for, I guess, 3 years now. Right up about 3 years. I'm a couple months from 3 years of running multiple trucks. And I've ran my fleet during what I think is the height of the good times, and right now at the bottom of the bad times. Well, hopefully it's the bottom. Hopefully it doesn't continue to get worse. But right now is definitely the bad times. So I feel like I've kind of while I'm pretty new to trucking at 5+ years, I feel like I kind of have, I feel both extremes of running a fleet of trucks with Primeinc. So let me get to these questions here. So this comment is from Big Rig Butters. Got it over here on this phone. It says, I'm curious to know about how you have a fleet of lease purchase trucks at Prime. I assume that it's basically just you assume the risk of the truck note, then find your own drivers. Yes and yes. You absolutely assume the risk of the truck note, and you are totally responsible for the finding your own drivers. So he says, so if you don't have a driver for a month or two, you have to make that payment. Absolutely. And I'll talk about that here in a bit, because that's a big pain point right there. It says, presumably they have to go through all the same stuff that a Prime driver normally would, qualified training, etc., right? Yes, they have to be a Prime driver, and they're going to be a company Prime driver. They wouldn't get to skip it just because they are your driver. Well, they can skip it. They can skip the training if they are a CDL holder with very recent experience. So you'd still have to go to orientation and all that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be someone who comes through Prime's training program, but they'd have to qualify as an existing CDL OTR experienced driver who goes through orientation and then gets in a truck. So, and then they'd have to be a company driver. So hopefully that, what was it, Big Rig Butters? To start out, that answers your question. So, or your questions. So let's now kind of expand on that a little bit and get into whether or not I think it's a good idea. So I've got quite a few friends who, like me, started building a fleet during the COVID years. And I don't want to say that we made a mistake, although one in particular would say we made a mistake. He and I talked a couple months ago, and he was like, you know, I think we definitely made a mistake. I think, like so many others in the trucking industry that made decisions based on the COVID era of freight, didn't anticipate things going downhill as in the way that they did as quickly as they did. So if there's a mistake part of it, that would be the mistake part of it. Is there a mistake in taking risk? Well, there can be, but also you don't get to certain reward without taking certain risk. So I don't want to say that it was a mistake to take the risk in building a fleet at the time, but there were certainly some mistakes, probably, if you want to use the word, made in the timing of building a fleet without more solid knowledge of what was to come next. If that makes sense, I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit all over the map there. But I'll tell you this. So here's what you have to think of. First of all, you cannot build a private fleet with standard leases. When I say standard lease, I mean just the typical Primeinc lease. With a standard lease, which means it's not a vehicle that you're purchasing. It's a vehicle that you're going to turn in at the end of 3 years. And you're basically renting that truck from Success Leasing, from Prime. You cannot have more than one of those at a time. So you can't build a fleet with rented trucks. So you have to do lease purchase. Now, once you switch from and also you can't do both. You can't do a standard lease and a lease purchase. So if you're in a standard lease, you can't go do a lease purchase and keep your standard lease and run 2 trucks. Conversely, you can't be in a lease purchase and also standard lease a truck and put a driver in that truck. You have to go exclusively to lease purchase, the lease purchase program, and that's the only way to build a private fleet. And there's no limitations on that. If you had the deposits and the down payments to order 10 trucks at a time, you could order 10 trucks. You could order 100 trucks. So there's no limitations on that. It's not like you order 1 truck and then have to wait a year or wait 6 months. There's no limitations on that. And the lease purchase is a walk-away lease, just like the lease, the standard lease. Now, I see a lot of shit being talked out there all the time, and have for years, about lease purchase, still being lease. And to me, that's all BS. If you guys, longtime subscribers, remember, I did a video probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, about how I was comparing pricing at a dealership with a bank versus pricing at Success Leasing going through with their finance charge. And it actually was a better deal going through Prime. The truck was cheaper than it would have been now granted, this was during COVID and trucks were in high demand. But at the dealership, the truck was more expensive for the same specs with no APU. And APUs now, they can be $20,000. At the time, I think they were maybe $12,000. They can be upwards of $20,000 depending on the setup now. And they're very expensive to have installed as well. With a lease purchase, that includes, when at the end of the truck, when the truck's paid off, you've got the APU installation, all that. So it was a better deal. And so basically what ended up happening is if you went through a bank, you were going to pay more money going to a dealership. Now that may not be the case everywhere. It's not a blanket proclamation. I'm just telling you, in my comparisons, that was the case. So to me, the only difference in owing a bank the money versus paying the money to Success Leasing is that the price is less, or was when I signed my contracts, less to go through Success Leasing. It was a better deal. That's the only difference. And someone a week or two ago was in an argument with me about this, and they were like, well, but Prime you have to run Prime freight. No, you don't. You can take the truck elsewhere and run other freight. Well, they could come take the truck away for any reason they want. I don't know that I buy that, but if you stop making payments to the bank, what are they going to do? So it's just silly. It's just a lease purchase is basically financing a truck pretty similarly to what you would do going through a bank. So I stand by the lease purchase program. I think it's great. So getting back to our decisions, us private fleet owners, to start building fleets during the COVID years, there was a video I made where I said that I didn't anticipate truck prices would drop. I was definitely wrong about that. I grossly underestimated how oversaturated the market would become with trucks, and how quickly volumes and capacity would get out of whack. So the model as envisioned back then was that if you buy a new truck every year, then eventually you're going to reach the cycle where you have a truck to sell every year. And this was at a time where you could sell a truck with 500,000 miles for $90,000. Well, now you can't sell a truck with 500,000 miles for half that. So that creates a big problem with that model. In addition to that, I didn't anticipate that the cost of literally everything would increase by 30%. Everything. That's the cost of tires, load locks, anti-gel, repairs, your PMs on your APU, your PMs on your tractor, gloves, anything, any boots, anything that you have to buy to function as a trucking business has increased by 30% or more since the time that I began building the fleet. So I knew inflation was coming, and I did videos at the time about that. And I had a lot of people tell me I was wrong. I was not wrong about that. But I was wrong about the price of trucks, the amount that truck values would decrease. Terribly wrong about that. And so that really messes things up substantially. So we've just gone through this time where fleet owners and so many people outside of Prime went and bought trucks and bought trailers at a time where freight was at its peak and costs were very low. The cost of fuel, the cost of anything that you needed to buy was all very affordable and reasonable and manageable. And it just was different. In fact, it didn't really start. This is what I was talking with the other fleet owner, and he's a YouTuber too. I just don't. It was a private conversation. I'm not going to go out who it was or exact details about most of that conversation unless he were to tell me that I could. and it was a private conversation. But I'll just tell you this. What I told him was that I began feeling the shift in January of 23. I think this was probably well before most solo operators felt it. I began, and anyone else who has multiple trucks probably felt the shift in the cost at the same time, because it's amplified. It's amplified. If it's just you and your truck, and you've got to supply your truck, and you got to, keep tires going for your truck, which, by the way, that's another thing. With a lease purchase, you're still going to have a tire fund that you have to pay into. But that tire fund does not get used when you replace tires. In a lease, unlike a standard lease, in a standard lease, if you have a tire fund and you need to go get a tire, well, the cost of that tire is going to come out of your tire fund. But in a lease purchase, the cost of that tire is not going to come out of your tire fund. The tire fund in a lease purchase is there in case you bail on a lease purchase, so the Prime has money in that fund for them to replace the tires. Now, it's true that at the end of the lease purchase, when your truck's paid off, you'll get that tire fund back. So in my case, roughly about $3,000 at the end of the lease purchase comes back, right? But it's a big pain point for you during that 3 years of the lease purchase, because anytime tires have to be replaced, you get a blowout or anything like that, that's going to hit your settlement. It does not come out of your tire fund. So just an example of how that's amplified, that is times however many trucks you have. So if you've got 3 trucks and all 3 of them needs tires at the same time, and there's no used tires in stock at the terminal or wherever you're getting tires, well, shit, man, for one truck, that's $5,000. If you got to have 4 drives put on one truck, that's $5,000. Now, what if you have to have tire, which I have two trucks, just had to have, one truck just had 4 tires replaced last week. 2 of them were the original tires, and 2 of them were used tires that were bought, I don't remember how long ago. And then this truck, I just had to put 2 tires on it about 2 weeks ago. So, and none of that comes out of tire fund. So, it just whacks you. It's all amplified. So anyway, going back to January 2023. So you take that amplification. So everything's going, the cost starts really surging in 2023. And I went from a period of time where I had just gone through a year where every truck would pretty consistently either break even or be slightly profitable. And I was happy with that. That was the best case scenario for me. That's all we ever expected when we started building a fleet. And our expectations were met until about January of last year. Now, at the same time that costs were surging and increasing, we had drivers being replaced, or home time overlapping, or health issues with drivers, or whatever it may be. Truck broken down. With a lease purchase, you do not get breakdown pay either. There's no breakdown pay. So if your truck is out of commission for a week and a half or 2 weeks, so be it. You got to make that payment. There's no breakdown pay. There's no hotel pay. There's nothing there's none of that. Even if it's warranty, it doesn't matter. There's no breakdown pay. So it was just this collision of breakdown, driver swapping. And on the driver swapping, that's something that this individual and I were talking about earlier. Not only do you have to find your own drivers, which can be very difficult. Now, for us on YouTube, it's a little bit easier because we have an audience we can go out and talk to. I know 2 fleet owners that don't have YouTube channels, and it's it's just god awful for them because they have to sit a truck at the terminal with a sign in a window or something like that. There's not an audience they can go talk to find drivers. So not only do you have to find your own drivers, but it is going to be dramatically expensive to change drivers. I think a lot of people had it in their head, myself included, that when you have to switch a driver in your truck, one driver is leaving your truck for whatever reason, they're going to another industry, they're leaving the industry, going to another company, or switching to lease, or whatever the case may be. I remember the first time it happened, I thought this was going to be a really smooth, quick process. I already had another driver lined up, right? Boy, was that a harsh lesson to learn, because that's not how it goes down at all. What happens is the driver takes your truck to the terminal, Springfield, and then the other driver has to be routed, and maybe they have to finish some things up. Maybe they got to run home to get some supplies. Maybe they're out in California and maybe they're delivering a load to California, and then they've got to work their way back to Springfield. It could be a week and a half or 2 weeks before that new driver gets to the terminal, after the time that the other driver has left your truck. And you have to go to the terminal because you have to clean the truck and get it prepared, make sure everything's good, inspect the truck, make sure that it's stocked with everything that it needs, which you're responsible for. All the fluids, oil, coolant, anti-gel, anything that filters, whatever the truck needs, you're responsible. You need to keep the truck stocked. You're gonna be down for a week in that whole process. My reefer just kicked on, so I apologize for the hum. But you're gonna be responsible for that whole process. So you're gonna be down. Your truck is gonna be parked. The truck you're driving is gonna be parked for that week. Plus the truck that's having a driver change is probably gonna be parked for a week or two. So now you're at 2 or 3 truck payments between the 2 trucks that are sitting there and the 1 truck that's sitting there for probably 2 weeks. Now you're 3 payments in the hole without running freight on those 3 payments. So even the process of switching drivers is very expensive. We're talking, $3,000-$4,000 out of your pocket to switch drivers. So it's very, very high risk. Very high risk. There was already, previous to 2023, very little room for error when you're building a fleet, especially if you don't already own 1 or more trucks, if they're not already paid off, which mine weren't. There was already very little room for error. Now, in this high cost world, where the average gross revenue per truck has not increased 30%, but the cost of everything else has increased 30%. Now your margin of error is there is no room for any error. No room. I will tell you this, I've been 10,000 or more in the hole twice within the last year. And that's a beast to climb out of when revenues aren't increasing, when you're sitting 24 hours between loads. It was a lot easier to climb out of that kind of hole a year and a half, 2 years ago. A lot easier. I used to be pretty confident about getting into a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 hole didn't faze me at all. The freight was there, and I could just go run my ass off and get out of the hole pretty quick. A week or two, probably 2 weeks of a $5,000 hole. Now, you get $5,000 or $10,000 in the hole, man. I mean, you're just rolling down the road, just praying a tire doesn't go out, or just anything. Even if it's warranty work, it doesn't matter because you're not getting breakdown paid. There's just no room for error right now. So when you take all this into account, And there's other costs involved with a lease purchase too that I think a lot of people don't consider, that again are not that big of a problem if you're solo, but when you amplify it, like for example, we as lease purchase owner operators, or whatever you want to call us, I know super truckers out there, you're not owner operators, whatever. If you owe money to a bank, then it's no different than owing money to Success Leasing, but whatever you want to call it. We also pay for insurance on our tractors, which standard lease operators don't pay. It's through First Guard, and it's not crazy, but it's like it's about $500 per month per tractor. Okay, so there's other costs involved that you wouldn't have on a standard lease, and that's amplified by every truck you add to your fleet. So no breakdown pay, no access to your tire fund. You've got extra costs like insurance and things like that for your tractors. I have a truck that had the most ridiculous amount of damage. He basically bumped his deer guard up against another truck's deer guard. In that other truck's deer guard, it made a scratch, literally a scratch, not a dent, a scratch, about 2 inches long, if I remember correctly. This is some time ago. A scratch in the paint. Now that sucks for that driver. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any cost involved. I'd be pissed if my deer guard got scratched by another deer guard too. But it wasn't $500 worth of damage. I'll tell you that right now. But I got pinged immediately for a $500 deductible that I've not had any refund from. So, and there's no one at Prime can seem to explain to me like what's the breakdown of the cost of the repairs for that guy, because he had a 2-inch scratch on his deer guard. A black deer guard, he had 2-inch scratch on it. What did the $500 pay for? Because I got charged the $500 and none of it got refunded to me after. So, and this is a long time ago. So, if trailer backs into something or deer guard bumps a deer guard, guess what? $500. So you gotta, and again, that's amplified by every truck you add to your fleet. So it's a high risk. Now there can be reward. You start paying off these trucks, and now you've got multiple trucks running without payments. Now is a terrible time to try to sell a truck. I mean, I've got a friend who's buying trucks, and he's willing to pay $50,000 for a truck if it's under 300,000 miles. Great service records, history, no accidents, well maintained, if it's under warranty. But that's a best case scenario. 55,000, that's a best case scenario. Well, if you run that truck an extra year instead of selling it, you're pretty much going to pick up 60,000 in additional net gain because you're less 60,000 in payments. And then you still have the truck, you still have the asset, at the end of that extra year that you're running the truck. So right now is not a good time to try to sell trucks. Right now is a better time to try to run it. But again, it's just the risk to reward ratio right now, to me, does not just, I would not try to build a fleet if I was starting right now. I canceled my 4th truck order. Didn't go through with my 4th truck order, just because it was just like, we had to cut the bleeding. So if I were in this freight market right now, even with this YouTube ability to reach out for new drivers, I would not try to add a 2nd or a 3rd or a 4th or a 5th truck. Wouldn't do it. Even if I had owned trucks and didn't have payments to make, I wouldn't do it. What is this message from Prime? Why am I getting a message from Prime right now? That's always concerning. So, it's a lot to say to get to that point, but I wanted to make sure that I explained to you all my reasons for saying that. Again, cost of everything is increased by like 30% across the board, and it's almost exactly 30%. Look at things like Blue Beacon washouts. Even though we don't pay for the washouts, well, a year and a half ago they were $37.50. Now they're $42.50, I believe. So it's everything is increased that way. Literally everything. So, but has your profit increased by 30%? No. Has even the gross revenue per truck increased by 30%? No. If you're out there working an hourly job, has your hourly, if you were making, $12 an hour, are you now making $15 or $16 an hour? Probably not, unless you're in California. But I mean, the vast majority, if you're on salary, the vast majority, say you're making $90,000 a year as a salary, are you now making $120,000 a year later? Probably not. You probably didn't get a $30,000 pay raise. So the revenue has not even increased at all, much less 30%. But the cost has increased 30%, which to me makes running a private fleet right now just absolutely absurd, unless you owned, half your trucks, or, I mean, if you got a fleet of like 10 trucks, you need to be like Junior Honduras, who started this a long time ago and probably has half his trucks paid off, because then your risk is way, way lower, right? So I would not wish it on an enemy to start a private fleet in 2024. It is no. It's just tough, man. Tough. Anyway, I got to kill some time here, because this load, which is a great load, by the way, only weighs 25,000 pounds. It's amazing. I've been getting 10.7 miles per hour, or per gallon, and I'm in the hills of Virginia, Maryland, and PA. So it's a great load, but the problem, which shouldn't be a problem, but it is a problem just because of parking in my clock, is that it got loaded early, and it got loaded fast. And I had already started my clock, so I can't get to where I want to park too early, because there will be no parking there. But I also have this dilemma of not wanting to go through cities during rush hour, so I have to thread this needle here and park just long enough to where there should be some spots open up by the time I come off the road, but also not too long to where I have to go through cities during rush hour in the morning. So that's the life, ain't it? Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. I appreciate the comments. I, as always, am very delayed in responding to most comments, but I want y'all to know I do read them. And that one really stood out, and it's been at the heart of many conversations I've had over the past couple weeks. I've had to tell multiple people I would not recommend it. And, if they want to go through with it, great. And I try to provide some advice and thoughts and commentary to maybe help with the decision, but just as the simplest answer, no, it's a terrible time to try and do it. Even in the best of times, it's still high risk, but in this market, no way, man. All right, y'all, be safe, make good decisions, always drive to thrive. Talk to y'all soon.